Okay, Paleo, we're continuing on. Uh, this is a multi-part uh, response to your video on free trade, and hopefully it'll be a three-parter. We'll see how far I have to go to get it. I'm really starting to chip away at your misconceptions here and almost have you totally destroyed now. So I'll just keep pounding away here. What I want to talk about is now we talk about the division of labor, and we see how people are actually less employed, but they're better off. And we see how certain people in the society will be out of work, but the society in general will be better off. And I want to kind of set up, three top concepts and kind of bring it all down into the one for the final crushing blow on you. But in this one, I want to talk about proliferation. And what I mean by that is that through the free market and through free trade, the proliferation of these great ideas, or I should say these great ideas proliferate down to the masses. And I kind of touched on it a little bit in the last video, but I'll use Gutenberg's printing press as an example. Before Gutenberg's printing press, books were very, very expensive. Okay, and Gutenberg invented this press that could mass produce books, or could produce books much, much quicker and cheaper. And so this was a great boon, to society, because now the cost of books was actually within reach of a greater percentage of the people. So you can imagine when Gutenberg first came along with that press, that it was a better method, it was a cheaper method. He immediately garnered a very, heavy share of the book market, at least in his area. The press became to be the preferred method of making these books, and immediately almost you would have to imagine he had more business than he could handle. Okay, so what did he do? He had to hire apprentices, had to hire hands, had to hire helpers, and so these people had to be trained to operate the press. Gutenberg no doubt had to build a second press, okay, and hire people to build that, and third and fourth, fifth press, and so on and so forth, until he had a quite large operation. Well, it did take long for Gutenberg to have to, train a supervisor in all the ways of the press, all the intricate details of how the press would work, for them to manage production while Gutenberg was in his absence. Okay, and once this had happened, maybe he had 2 or 3 really good supervisors under him. It didn't take long for one of them to get kind of enterprising on themselves and begin, and branch out from Gutenberg and set up their own shop. Okay, and so on and so forth. Then, it was Gutenberg versus this guy. And theoretically they had half of the printing press business in that area, let's say. And, it didn't take long. Somebody in that shop branched out on their own, and say if Gutenberg was in Paris, they went on, somewhere a little bit further out, and so on and so forth, until eventually the printing press became to be a common way, or the common way, to have books made, throughout, Western Europe, let's say, or throughout that part of the world. It came down to the masses. So if this was the cost of books prior to the Gutenberg printing press, the printing press had to make things either of the same quality at a lower price, or at a higher quality for the same price, which is the same lower cost, per unit of quality. So they had to be better. If this was the current level of books, Gutenberg had to be better. But through competition and through proliferation of knowledge out into the people, even the printing press business, let's say it came here, got more competition, got cheaper and better by the proliferation of knowledge. Okay? And I say that because that is what has happened, in this country. It's very easy to see. When this country was first formed, or before the formation of the country, but life on this continent, and for mankind, basically, has all gone through these different steps that I'll talk about here. life began, as a hunting and gathering society. When people were in very rudimentary stages of existence. What was on the Earth's resources, was gathered either by hunting, for animals, and by gathering things that were already growing. That's why you had nomadic people. That's why things like that. And so they would just take advantages of the resources that were in their area. Then society, people began to study the things that they had gathered. For a bell pepper, for example. Somebody might find a wild bell pepper growing out in the wild, and they'd cut it apart, they'd look at the seeds, they'd experiment with it, and didn't take long for them to figure out that they could grow these things for themselves in their own locations. And so societies moved towards agriculture. And many of the societies in developing countries became largely agricultural societies. And that's basically where, we were at around the time that this country was formed. We were an agricultural society. In the beginning of this country, it took about 90 to 95 people out of 100 to provide the food supply for the people living here. Through this process of proliferation, of improving technology, of knowledge proliferating out to more and more of the masses of people, this number has slowly or steadily shrunk down to the point where it's about 3 to 4 individuals out of 100 now that's required out of the population to make our food supply. So only 3 to 4% of the population now is involved in agricultural activities. Well, if you look at the macroeconomic history of our country, and excuse me a second while I check our time, it's very easy to see the stages that we've gone through, from hunting and gathering, which we didn't really see in this country because our country was not established at the time when it was common for societies to be hunting and gathering societies, but it went through that, down to agricultural society, which we were able to see very easily in our history. And it's easy to see that it moved into the next step, which is the industrial age. And that's very easy to see. Are all those 90 people, this is what I want to get to, is all those 90 people that have gone down to 3, are 87 now just unemployed? Or were they ever at that time just unemployed? Just sitting around the house with no job, nothing to do? No, of course not. When it went from 90 down to 10, 90 down to 80, down to 70, all along the way, those that were no longer needed in agriculture were caught up into the next stage of development. It happened all along the way. So we don't have a great unemployment problem here because we've gone from 90 down to 3 in agriculture. Your interests and your time available begin to be concentrated in other areas. When it becomes, agriculture is about providing the food supply for this country. Once we're able to provide our food with less people, well, it's not just good enough to be well fed. Other needs, the human mind goes to other needs and other wants that will be fulfilled. And there will arise a market for those products, and those people that were involved at a very heavy rate, 90 out of 100, in producing the food supply for this country, will then be caught up into the industries that arise once we're able to provide our food supply with less percentage of the population. And it's very easy to see in this country that went into the industrial age. Those people are not unemployed. So when one area diminishes, another area increases, unless you somehow think that every possible human need ever imagined has already been fulfilled, and the human mind won't dream up new wants and create new markets for new products that are heretofore unimagined. So that's where we'll have to stop for this video, and we'll continue on in the next one.